So the really nice thing with Synergy Home Care is we customize plans for each individual family. So what that means is it could be 1 hour a day, it could be all the way up to 24-hour care. And that really allows it to also be an affordable option. The trust of small locally run businesses really helps to build that bridge of trust and communication.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Alicia Harmon. She's the owner of Synergy HomeCare. Alicia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kelsey, for having me. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So Alicia, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, sure. Big question. Where do I start, right? So my name, like she mentioned, is Alicia Harmon, and I am the owner of Synergy Home Care, which we'll be talking about a little bit more here today. But my background, so I'm from Western Wisconsin, little town called Prescott, Wisconsin. Grew up with my parents. I came from a really large family. My mom is one of 9. My dad's one of 6. And we'll get into that a little bit later as to why I'm mentioning that. Personally, I have 2 brothers. I went to college in St. Cloud, Minnesota, for those that maybe know where that is in the state of Minnesota. Currently reside in Arden Hills, Minnesota with my husband of 13 years. I have 2 little boys, Leo and Reese, who are 9 and 11, who keep me busy with soccer, football, fishing, all of it. And then my big obligation right now, other than owning a business, of course, is our 8-month-old puppy, Winnie, golden retriever, who is a very naughty girl and keeps us on our toes, but also, brings a lot of joy to our life.
Yeah,
But a little bit about me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So an 8-month-old puppy, holy cow, 2 boys, you've got your hands full on top of
Yeah.
being an owner of Synergy. So tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about Synergy.
Yeah, so Synergy Home Care. So the soundbite there, the big thing on that is we care for those affected by age or illness to live wherever they call home and to allow them to do that. And Synergy Home Care, for those in the medical community might understand this, we are technically non-medical. So what that means is we help with all the things that maybe those, between 30 and 60 take for granted. So think of emptying the dishwasher, changing your sheets. So that light housekeeping, how do you keep your house safe? And then really to the extreme of helping with personal cares. So helping with shower assistance, making sure your loved ones or yourself, you're safe in your home and not falling in the home. Also toileting assistance, some of those little things that as we continue to age in place or affected by illness, maybe don't want your loved ones to help out with. And so my team as caregivers come in and help with those assistant pieces.
That's fantastic, and I'm sure very much needed. So how did you become interested in Synergy and in the
Yeah, great
care?
question. So I mentioned already my super large families.
Yeah.
So I have been really blessed that, as my grandparents age, that we had family members that could help those people. And generationally, our families are getting smaller and kids are moving across the country. And a lot of times parents or our loved ones don't have people to help around the house or take care of those little things. And so prior to this, I was at Target Corporation for about 14 years. And prior to that, I had actually worked with a nonprofit with the elderly. And I really saw this white space of how do we allow people to age in their house without having to go right to a nursing home or going to an assisted living? And I grew up with my dad and my mom, and my dad always said, I never want to go to a nursing home. I want to stay home. And so as I was reaching my 40th year, I was burning out with Target and corporate America, to be honest. And I was looking at doing something more grassroots and get into the communities. And as I started thinking about my background, I really enjoyed working with the elder population. I liked the business aspect. Synergy Home Care kind of popped up, to be honest. And my best friend, Stacy, we were actually doing some brainstorming and looking at white spaces, in the field. And this is something that kept coming up. So how do you connect people in communities? How do you add joy to their lives? How do you help make it easier for them to age in place?
Yeah.
And so this was a huge opportunity I saw at the time.
Yeah. So break down a little bit more for me. You started to kind of talk about the services that your caregivers can provide. Break that down a little bit more for me about some of the biggest things that they're able to help with, and the smallest things too, I suppose.
Yeah, no, great question. And so like I mentioned, so Synergy Home Care, if I didn't mention it yet, we are part of a franchise system. So whether you're listening to us here in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Arizona, you name it, there's about 140 owners across the country that can help with these services. And like you mentioned, so breaking it down a little bit more, we have three different categories: companionship, homemaking, and then personal care assistance. So companionship. So the example I use here a lot is think of, Alzheimer's, dementia, so on the rise right now. Oftentimes what we see is a couple who has been married 45, 50 years, and one of the spouses gets Alzheimer's or is diagnosed with some form of dementia. And so the healthy spouse needs a break. They're the primary caregiver. They need to be able to get out of the house and they need to know their loved one is safe. So that's where we can come in and help with companionship or respite. So that can be as little as, having, coffee with someone, playing cards with someone, those little things that, once again, I think most of us take for granted.
Yeah.
And then the next category really goes into light housekeeping. So how do we also keep your house uncluttered? How do we keep your house safe and clean? Especially as people continue to have mobility issues and fall risk. The little things on the floor might not seem like a big deal or the clutter, but it's super important to get those things cleaned up on the floor to ensure that people are safe. I also always use the example of a lot of people live in older houses, 3-story houses, where especially here in the Midwest, where the laundry is in the basement and it's maybe no longer safe for your loved ones to go up and down the stairs. So helping with laundry, helping with changing the bed. It's hard for people as they age to put corners on the beds, and a lot of us will joke, hey, well, I want someone to come change my bed too. Truly, yes, that's a nice service to have, but realistically, those things can be really, really hard for people as well.
Yeah.
And then the highest category that we go into is personal cares. So helping with incontinent care, helping with showering, helping with mobility assistance as well.
Yeah, wow. So it sounds like you can really do, from the smallest things to some of the more intense, caregiving. So
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit more about, some of the ways that you're able to stand out from your competition with Synergy.
Yeah, so great question. So the really nice thing with Synergy Home Care is we customize plans for each individual family. So what that means is it could be 1 hour a day, it could be all the way up to 24-hour care. And that really allows it to also be an affordable option for families to come in. And also just to get comfortable with the service. My biggest thing I hear from clients is, well, I don't want a stranger in my house. I can do this myself. Or how do I know I can trust them? And I think that's the nice thing where Synergy comes into. Everyone is trained, background checked. We are the owners of that. And, the trust of small locally run businesses really helps to build that bridge of trust and communication.
Yeah, I'm sure that allows for a graceful transition to kind of like you said, going from
Mhm.
not having necessarily the support at home to being able to have that support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and once again, it can be small support, right? You don't probably need someone around the clock, and that's okay. And so how do you get someone comfortable with that and to allow a friend maybe to come in and help?
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about how someone may first be able to come and get involved with Synergy. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we are all over national platforms. So think of Google. That's probably where most people find us. The other thing I highly encourage people, so let's say there's an early onset diagnosis or a change in your loved one, being active within your community centers is really important. A lot of counties have really strong aging and disability resource centers. So that's another great way to hear about services like myself or others that can maybe help your loved one through these transitions. And also for yourself. There's a lot of caregiver resources out there too because it can be as trying for, the loved one who's going through it as well as the person diagnosed. So really encouraging that. The nice thing too with Synergy Home Care is, so let's say we get the call, we'll talk you through the process, the questions we have, really asking you about what would be useful for us to know. And then we do a free home assessment. So we come out to the home, really assess for safety, talk through through the individual plan with the family and then schedule what we think is necessary. And, I always joke a little bit about this, but sometimes I'm the worst salesperson for my business because sometimes I'll go into homes and I'll be like, home care isn't the right fit for you. It maybe is best for you to move or to make that choice. But I think it's helping families through that time of crisis and help allow them to have some resources available.
Yeah, talking about resources too, I imagine a lot of what Synergy does too is help with that educational aspects of, not only helping, some of people who are having aging parents or having aging,
Mhm.
people that they need to care for, but also too education for, like you said, spouses or partners or things like that.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, whether it be day programs that we can suggest, whether it be even hospice, there's different times and place for many different resources out there. We call it a continuum of care. So, what does that look like? And just helping educate because my business might be not be the right one for everyone at that
Yeah.
time. But once again, hopefully helping people through a time of crisis to know what is the right thing to do.
Yeah, so kind of talking about trends that you've seen in this space, how do you think, with the baby boomer population coming up, how important do you think it's going to be to have synergy home care, and an
Yeah.
all-encompassing care kind of as that generation comes?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be huge because once again, it's also not only the baby boomers, but with the baby boomers, there's a bigger trend to stay home,
Yeah.
right? And so, how do you allow? And then also talking a little bit about finances too. I mean, money's never a fun topic, but it is a much less expensive option to
Yeah.
stay in your home and get 10, 20, 30 hours of home care a week versus moving to an assisted living versus moving to a nursing home facility. So even as that trend continues, what does that look like for true properties to stay in, and what makes most financial sense as well? And I think everyone is talking right now about staffing shortages. What does that look like? And so the other thing that's nice about Synergy is since we don't require 24-hour care every day, there is more options for one-on-one care too versus a lot of assisted living and nursing home settings are very short staffed. So what does that look like too as you're going into a care facility?
Yeah, making sure that, your loved ones, but also, if you are the one that needed some extra care, that you're receiving the care, one, that you deserve, but also two, that you feel comfortable enough that, your loved ones are being taken care of. And I'm sure that that's a big aspect of what Synergy is able to provide for people.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, I have adult children that live all over the country that have their parents in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and
Yeah.
they're maybe seeing them once or twice a week. And this opens up that communication of someone in their house once or twice a week, and we can communicate directly with those family members too.
Yeah. And it sounds like communication is one of the biggest pieces of Synergy. What are some other ways that Synergy is really able to stand out?
So, but yeah, you hit that on the head. The communication is number one goal, and it has been forever for me because what I always say is we're not going to be perfect, but we are going to communicate. And I think that's the big things. People wants to know something you can trust. I think the other huge diversification or the piece that makes us unique is truly those customized plans. We talked about that a little bit already, but being able to customize a plan per family, per day of the week is super important just to allow people to live their lives still. People still have plans,
Yeah.
sometimes daily or doctor's appointments. So how can we fit in around that?
Yeah. And I can certainly hear like the passion and the care behind your voice, really saying, like you said, you're not the best salesman for the company. However, like you truly, I can hear it in your voice that you care, about this population. You care about providing that support and that peace of mind to provide that at-home care.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And you're right. And I think, so much of what I do is that education piece and how do you do that correctly, and I think it's education and then it's also making the correct one-on-one pairings, finding the right caregivers to make sure they can support truly the clients that we're taking on.
Yeah. So you said, you came from corporate America. Talk to me a little bit more about how you've been able to grow Synergy Home Care, because like you said, it's a big
Yeah.
educational piece, but talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one thing so kind of a couple nods. So I mentioned what was important to me is to get back into the community that I grew up in. And my dad is actually a wills and estate planning attorney, which was, it's kind of funny looking back on it now because even he hadn't heard of home care. And that seems like a pretty big miss, right? Like this is the population he's working with.
Yeah.
And my mom actually growing up, she had worked in nursing homes for several years too as different activities directors. So a lot of what I've been able to do to grow the business is once again, get back into the communities, network with people that I knew before, and really build that brand and reputation there. And I think then the other big part is truly word of mouth. Like how, as we're taking on clients, how are we doing a good job to make sure that then they're telling their friends in
Yeah.
their communities? And, a lot of people live, even if let's say they're not in a nursing home or assisted living, there's different elder communities now. And how are you, really networking within those groups? But I'd really say, it goes back to that trust in taking on clients and building good relationships with those clients to build that word.
Yeah, relationships. That's a center of, great businesses. So, kind of as a business owner, talk to me a little bit about how you knew you were on the right path to success.
Sure. No, that's a really good question. And I think, so I'm moving into my fourth year of business, which is crazy, right? Everyone joked like going into a pandemic, we still survived, right? I think that's pretty important. But I think for me, success was one step at a time. And I've been everyone is having staffing issues right now. Where I have been very, very lucky is that I can control the flow of clients that I have coming in. So I always say, like, if you're at a fast food place or a bank, like you can't control how many people are walking in your door. But what I can control is being really honest with people up front that it's going to take us 1 to 3 weeks to staff or, take on the right clients to make sure that we can be successful. And I think communication we talked about a lot, but the other thing for me is just integrity and honesty and being honest with what we can accomplish. And I will never take a client on that I can't meet their goals. So I think that's another thing, having those conversations up front just to make sure that our goals align, because you want to build a good solid baseline or foundation of your business and not just let everyone in the door. So how do you set your boundaries appropriately?
Yeah. So, I think boundaries is super important. And like you said, communication seems to be the center of relationships and also, Synergy Home Care.
Mhm.
So if you were to leave our listeners either with one thing kind of about Synergy Home Care or, the aging population and at home care, what would you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah. So I think the big thing I would say is be planful. The one guarantee, aging and death and illness is something no one wants to talk about. And that's something that I'm really trying hard to change because it's not always a comfortable conversation, but it's inevitable. And so being the more planful you can, ask those questions, ask your parents, ask your grandparents those questions so they can be in control of those situations also is so important. And so whether it be planning for home care or planning for the next move or even funeral plans, those are all important conversations, as uncomfortable as they might be. So I think asking those questions now it's super important. And don't be afraid of it. It can be, not that it can be a fun conversation, but make it a normal conversation is maybe the best way to say it.
Yeah. And I don't think necessarily people understand or have the skills to be able to have that conversation and also
Yeah.
to be able to talk to parents about that because I can imagine that
Mhm.
there can be a lot of pushback too of, wanting to keep that autonomy and keep that independence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're completely correct. And it can be really difficult. A couple of resources that are out there that I really appreciate. One is called Five Wishes. And what Five Wishes is I believe it's a 10-page document and it goes through the softer and some of the harder questions of aging. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to care? How do you want to live? And so, maybe familiarizing yourself with some of those pieces too would be helpful.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, locally, how would they get in contact with you? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, we're on Google and all the sites. So Synergy Home Care, you can actually put your zip code in and it'll set you right to the office that is closest to you. So that's number one, depending on where you live. Personally, we do have Facebook and Instagram pages, and Alicia Harmon at synergyhomecare.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then phone numbers, of course, to 612-256-2214 is our office number. And even if we're not in your area, I'm always open to answering questions. So always feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And I hope our listeners do take that to heart and kind of are able to have that conversation with you because you have that passionate, you're super easy to talk to. And I appreciate, the insight that you've provided, kind of your leadership style too, and how you've been able to grow Synergy Home Care.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, any follow-up questions, I'm always here and I appreciate your time too. So thank you.
All right, Alicia, thank you for being on Business Ninjas. Again, Alicia Harmon, owner G of Synergy Home Care. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.